You're tuned in to the Andrew Lawton Show.
Welcome back to the Andrew Lawton Show. We've been talking a lot about the tearing down of statues, the ripping down of names from myriad buildings, from schools to public edifices of a variety of types. And now we have, of course, what's been shaping up to be one of the battlegrounds for this, which is Ryerson University. Not only did a statue of the university's namesake, Egerton Ryerson, come down last week, but there are even, as we discussed in a previous show, pushes to change the university's name itself. Not just the name of the school newspapers, but basically to make it as though this guy never had anything to do with this school. Well, this didn't sit well with the Ryerson Conservative Club, which you may think is a campus club of the federal or provincial conservative parties, and you would have been right up until a certain point, and we'll talk about why that is now. But I want to welcome to the show Harrison Faulkner, who is the president of the Ryerson Conservatives. Harrison, good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you very much for having me, Andrew.
So the Ryerson Conservatives, I want to put this up here, put out a fantastic statement about this, basically saying, give us the statue. So the university might not want it, the activists might not want it. You're saying give it to us. And you've said here that the Conservative Club at Ryerson has been really on the front lines of trying to defend Egerton Ryerson's name and reputation. This isn't normally what a political club on campus would do, but you've had to fill that void, it sounds like.
Yeah, you're exactly right. For us, we just like to think of ourselves as regular university students. We don't expect that the responsibility to defend our history, to defend the facts of this country, we weren't expecting that to fall on our shoulders, and we were expecting that the university and the provincial government and any stakeholders involved in the process that carry a little bit more influence than us would step in. Would basically say these people are wrong. This mob is not historically accurate at all, and unfortunately, that has not been the case. I think a lot of people, politicians, especially on the conservative side, are afraid to engage in this particular battle because of what happened in Kamloops and because of the political danger, the perceived danger. That could come from someone who is just trying to defend a good man, someone who had great intentions, who is not what the left are portraying him to be, and really that hasn't happened. But we're the conservative club at Ryerson, and part of that is to conserve the identity of our university, to advance conservatism on our campus, and we really wouldn't be much of a conservative club at Ryerson if we weren't going to defend Egerton, if we weren't going to stand up to the criminal behavior that took place on Sunday. So that's really where we're at right now with this. And yeah, as you mentioned, we have been a little left behind, left to fight this battle on our own.
I want to get to how you have been treated within the conservative apparatus in a moment, but I want to drill down first into a comment you made about defending a good man. So you're not taking the position that, yeah, you know what, he might have done some things that weren't great, but it was the time, it was the context. You're saying that what he stands accused of, which is being a so-called architect of the residential schools that have become, I think, very rightfully criticized in history, you're saying that that really doesn't describe him all that accurately.
Well, of course, and before I get into it, our defense of Egerton Ryerson has, of course, by the left been taken as some sort of apology for the residential school system, and that's just not the case. What we are trying to say is that Egerton Ryerson, one, is not responsible for what happened in Kamloops and at that particular residential school. And we're also saying this line that has been parroted around by mainstream press, by left-wing politicians in this country, the architect of residential schools, that's just not the case. Egerton Ryerson is being accused as the architect or the mastermind of the residential school system because of a private letter he wrote to George Varden, who was I believe, the superintendent of education at the time. And Egerton Ryerson laid out what his beliefs were in the sense that he believed at the time Indigenous children should learn agriculture so that they can use the land that they have to make a good living off of it. He never advocated for forced child separation. He never advocated for any of the abuses that have since come out about the residential school system. And the Ryerson Conservatives believe that Egerton Ryerson not only has been chosen as the fall guy for the residential school system in today's era, we believe that the private letter Egerton Ryerson wrote to George Varden was used by people who knew they were doing something wrong in the late 1800s, and used Egerton Ryerson, a man who was about to die, as the architect of this system, because they knew what they were doing was wrong. And if you do any research at all about Egerton, you will know that that is the case, that Egerton Ryerson was an abolitionist. He fought for education for Black Canadians before anyone was even thinking about that. He was well ahead of his time. And further, he was a lifelong friend of the Mississauga of the Credit chief, and he learned Ojibwe so that he could understand these people better. And that is something that, understandably so, for the left, is never brought up in their criticisms of Egerton. But it would be fair for anyone else other than just the Ryerson Conservatives to put this information into the public conversation, to help us in this battle against historical illiteracy.
And you've had to, of course, battle against the school and against the mainstream media narrative on this. You've also found yourself in a bit of a battle with the party that your club historically has been aligned with, or parties rather, I should say, the federal Conservatives and the provincial Conservatives. And I just want to give people a bit of context here, because last year, this school year, but last year, Aaron O'Toole had famously come and done a little bit of a Zoom chat with your club, and he talked in a very frank manner about cancel culture and standing up for historic figures. And then the mainstream media caught wind of this, and Aaron O'Toole did, as you've pointed out in your statement, what so many conservative politicians do, which is backtrack, apologize, and not really win the support of any of the critics in the process. But where did things go off the rails after that point between you and Aaron O'Toole, and also, for that matter, the Ontario PCs and Doug Ford?
Well, first of all, the Ryerson Conservatives have been around for many years, and our affiliation with both parties has been really, really strong. And at the end of the day, although we may disagree with the party, our members are members of both of these parties. When we grow our club, we are growing the membership of both the parties, and so there is an understanding there and a respect there. But as you mentioned, Aaron O'Toole did speak to our club. We had a fantastic conversation with him in September. And we asked him about what we can do as Ryerson Conservatives to defend Egerton Ryerson's legacy and to push back against really these radicals and these criminals. And he gave us a great answer, one that we wanted to publicize to show that we have the support and the backing of our leaders. And of course, the press, after a few months, caught wind of this video and then tried to make Aaron O'Toole out to be this apologist for residential schools. And, under the heat of the moment, I can understand why someone would want to apologize. But if you do, as we've said before, if you do any research into Egerton Ryerson, there's nothing to apologize for what Aaron O'Toole said. Egerton Ryerson is not deserving of this level of criticism and this level of vitriol. What we take issue with is that when we do this, when we make these efforts as a conservative club, trying to conserve the identity of not just our university, but our country and our province, we expect that the elected Conservatives will also be interested in conserving this country, this province, and our university. And unfortunately, the tough part is that NDP politicians, Liberal politicians, they have engaged in this debate. They have entered this conversation, and we have really become the only voice, the only organization that is defending Egerton Ryerson. Our main issue is that we would like some support. We would have liked to have the backing of the premier, of the leader of the opposition, and to really feel that exists. And unfortunately, when it comes to this particular moment, we've been left to fight this on our own.
That's, I think, a very important point. And a lot of people would say for the Conservative Party, this isn't the fight they need to be taking up. This isn't the fight that is worth fighting in an election season, potentially, and all of that. And the problem with that is that if you cede the ground on these issues that are seemingly insignificant, eventually you get to the point where no one is left standing. And that's increasingly where we're at now. And to bring it back to the statue of Egerton Ryerson, there was a time not even that long ago where the school would be criticizing the vandalism of its property rather than saying, okay, we're not going to put it back up. So you're endorsing what the vandals have done. And you are right. It's becoming a very lonely battle.
Yes, you're exactly right. And this conversation wouldn't be right if we didn't accurately call out the university's role in this really embarrassing moment.
But in fairness, we expect that from universities now. You're talking about the conservative parties, or ostensibly conservative parties, being absent from this fight too.
Yes, and Ryerson University, known for its left-wing stances on public issues, we knew that this would be the case. But the difficulty with what happened on Sunday, the day that these criminals took down the Egerton Ryerson statue that stood for 132 years, I should add, is that the Toronto police knew that this was going to happen ahead of time. It was well publicized. We knew that this was going to happen, or we didn't know that the statue was going to come down, but that there was going to be a large demonstration. The police knew it. They actually tweeted that they would not tolerate vandalism or violence at the statue. And I personally went down to the statue when I heard of the news that the Egerton Ryerson statue had fallen. I went down there in my role as president of the Ryerson Conservatives and really the head of the only group in this fight, to see it from my own eyes, to really take in the gravity of this. And I couldn't find a single police officer anywhere on campus. In fact, I looked around where the Ryerson statue was, and I couldn't find any Ryerson security either, the security guards that all of our members pay for as part of our tuition to Ryerson. So again, it wasn't just an abandonment of our supporters that we felt we were left behind by. We were really left behind and abandoned by the Toronto police and Ryerson security. And no one was there to uphold the law. No one was there to actually push back against these really embarrassing scenes that have now played out on international news, which make our university look like a bit of a mess. More than a bit of a mess, but they do not make our university look good, and that's really a shame.
Now, I should say, I know I mentioned this at the beginning. You're saying in the statement here, give us the statue. That is a real offer. You're willing to take this from the university, right? And I just have to ask on top of that, where would you put it? I'm guessing most dorms don't have room, although I could be wrong.
Yeah, well, so that tagline is really, we've adopted it since the statue had come down because we're working on information that we've received from the university. I should say that I have spoken with people who work in the university, and they respect the work that we have done, and they understand that we are a stakeholder in this process, which we have to thank them for. They have told us that the body of the statue is in the possession of the university. Of course, the head is no longer on the statue, and the pedestal that it stood on is, I imagine, as well in the possession of the university. And that line comes from the fact that, as you mentioned at the top of the interview, the university doesn't want it. They've said that they're not going to put it up. The police don't want to defend it. The Ontario government hasn't shown any interest in protecting that statue or the history that it stands for. And as the only group that has publicly put up a defense of the statue, we believe that we should be the ones in possession of the body of the statue. Now, where we would put it, we're not quite sure as to where it would go. I will say that Egerton Ryerson grew up in near the town of Simcoe in southern Ontario. And we have, as a group, always felt that if the statue were to be moved, the statue should go down to Simcoe, Ontario, where it can be properly celebrated and properly venerated in Egerton Ryerson, where really that he is well respected in that area. We think the statue should go there, but of course, now that process is not going to work because it is headless and it is without a pedestal. So really what we're advocating for is to give the statue back to people that respect it. Maybe it might not be us, but in that statement, give us the statue, we're really talking about people who believe in the facts, believe in the real history of this country, not the narratives that are being spread. And we believe the statue should belong to those people.
Ryerson Conservatives President Harrison Faulkner, good to talk to you. Thanks very much for coming on, and great work on this.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
When I was in university, heavily involved in campus politics, so I have a great deal of appreciation. To be a conservative on a university campus, certainly a downtown Toronto university campus in 2021, is no doubt an act of courage and an act of rebellion. So good on Harrison Faulkner and his crew for, again, standing up against the malignment of a historic figure, and as we've just heard, whose only real sin was living in an era prior to the current one. So my thanks again to Harrison for coming on and talking about that.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.